Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing the next keynote speaker. And although he needs no introduction, there's a few things you may not know about him. This could be fun. So he's an avid runner, supports a number of charities around Sacramento. He's a doting husband and a father of 3 college-age children. I have 2 of those. He's an alumni at CSU Sacramento. His favorite superhero is Superman. Okay. He's a lover of dark chocolate, The Simpsons, as an avid Dallas Cowboys fan. I don't know. And furthermore, he's our state chief information officer and has served the people of California for over 25 years. So please join me in welcoming the director of the California Department of Technology, Carlos Ramos.
So just to clear the record, Batman is really close, so. Superman's cool, but Batman's got better toys. So thank you all for making the time to be here this morning, and thank you to TechWire for the invitation to be here with all of you. It's great to see so many familiar faces, both state and private sector folks, and I'm really looking forward to being able to share with you some of the things that we've been doing in California. You know, I was going to start off by telling you that it's been a really busy year for us in the state. But I think Bill and his team did that for us already. This is great. This is wonderful. Just doing the whole year in review for TechWire, for California, I thought was awesome. And I have to tell you a little bit of something here as I was looking at this. So, you know, twice a year I get to go back, and sometimes a little more than that, but get to go back and spend time with the other states, the other CIOs. You know, so Josh, to your question, is there any comparison? There really isn't any comparison. But we are very competitive among ourselves. And so several of my, my other state CIO friends have been on, you know, the cover of Public CIO and this and that. And so I'd never been on the cover, but none of them can actually boast at being a centerfold. So, so I got that on them. So, as I said, it's been a busy year. There's a lot to talk about in terms of what we've been doing in California. I'm actually only going to focus on a couple of topics. Let me see if I got this right. There we go. Really only on a couple of topics of things that we've been doing here, a couple of the initiatives. We're going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in our efforts to reduce the risk of failure on technology projects. Talk about some of the things we're doing around procurement. Talk a little bit about our cloud initiatives, and then finally just share with you a little bit of some of the information sharing and some of the best practices that we've been able to start implementing here in California and around the rest of the state around sharing information. So I will tell you this, though. Working in the public sector is something that you kind of go into, some of us on purpose, some of us on accident. But once you get in, it gets in your blood. And you know, you get in there for whatever your reasons, but you realize the impact that you can make. And as such, you know, a lot of people really devote their efforts and their careers to trying to be effective in their roles. And if you look around in the public sector folks that are here, there are a number of us here that really are here just because it is in our blood. And now, you know, some of us, I think it was Joe that was talking about the silver tsunami, right? There's a few silver tsunami surfers in the audience, right? I see a couple of folks I see Paul Benedetto back there trying to hide, you know, who have actually already taken that plunge and rode the silver tsunami. I want to take just a moment to recognize one individual who's here, who unfortunately for us in the public sector is going to be surfing off into the wonderful world of retirement. But I get the impression that he's probably going to still be engaged in some form or fashion with us here in the public sector. But I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the contributions, the effort, the commitment, the dedication, and the years-long career that Joe Panora has had here in the state of California, and the significant impact he's had on all of us in the public sector. So if you would join me, and Joe, if you wouldn't mind standing up and just acknowledging Joe's efforts. So Joe is one of the most active and very key members of our IT Executive Council, who helps drive a lot of the initiatives that I'm going to be talking to you about. So Joe, just thank you again on behalf of Governor Brown and all of us here in the state of California. Thank you for your career and your dedication. I also want to do a couple of quick introductions, just because I know since last time we were here, we've had a couple of folks, key members of the Department of Technology's executive team that have joined, who again, have a really interesting and challenging job. My job, I think, is just to come up with crazy ideas that I think sound great, and to go out and talk about them and think, these things can make things better for the state. These folks have the job of, if they are good ideas, actually have to implement them. And then if they're not, they kind of have to talk me back off the ledge. So I just want to introduce a couple of them. First and foremost, Andrea Wallen-Roman, our Chief Deputy Director for Policy. She joined our department this year. Dawood Godes over here, Director of OTEC. With Dawood is Ellen Ishimoto, also recently appointed as Chief Deputy Director of OTEC. Many of you, I think, have come across or will come across Tila Schaaf, who's our new Deputy Director for External Affairs. So Tila. And I don't know if I see her here, but is Becky Stilling here in the audience? I didn't get to see her. So Becky Stilling is our head of our IT project oversight division. There are a bunch of other folks from the department here, but these are some of the folks that have joined just since the last year. So I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to meet them. And then before I get into my remarks, 2 invitations for you. One is we have our table over here, our Department of Technology table. You can go and hear more about any of the initiatives that I'm going to be talking about over there. And then finally, on Monday afternoon, we have our holiday open house over at Caltech. So if you're in the area, stop by for some cookies and punch and a little bit of holiday cheer. So I would invite you all to stop by. So let's start with our presentation and talk a little bit about, I'm going to take you back to 2011. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want you to remember what the situation was like back then. First of all, Governor Brown had just been elected and was sworn in. The economy for the state of California was really kind of in the tank, and things were very difficult and challenging. I had just been appointed as CIO, and so one of the early things that I did, which I thought was really smart, was to go around and meet with some of you in the private sector and some of you in the public sector too, and get your thoughts and feedback on how was California doing in the area of IT, and specifically what were the things that we needed to work on. So here's just a little bit of a highlight of some of the feedback that I got from all of you in the private sector. How many of you are in the private sector, by the way, by show of hands? Okay, quite a few of you. So, basically what you told me is that you didn't like the way we did things. You didn't like our procurements. You didn't think that they really produced good value for the state. They made it really difficult for you to compete. You dreaded the cone of silence. And you didn't think that served us very well. And especially the smaller companies were interested in having better access to government and better access to the initiatives that the different agencies were working on. So I took that feedback to heart in looking at the things that we needed to change. I also talked to the state folks, and surprise, surprise, they had many of the same criticisms that you did. They also didn't like our procurements. They didn't like the fact that things took too long, and they didn't like the way that we did things over at Caltech. They thought our processes were too long, too bureaucratic, and really they didn't see a lot of value there. Just so you don't feel excluded, though, they had some complaints about you as well as private sector folks. They complained about, well, a lot of times we feel like we're getting the bait and switch. And, just so none of us feel excluded, we also got feedback from the legislature. And they didn't like the way any of us did anything. So, well, they didn't quite put it that way. Maybe they said it, more like they don't like it when projects don't work. And in their opinion, none of them ever worked. But they weren't far off, actually. So we took that feedback to heart. We thought, okay, it's obvious that we need to make some changes in the way that we do things in government. One, because technology is really part and parcel of the way government works nowadays. And secondly, because we really, for being the Golden State, for being the home of the Silicon Valley, didn't really do things as effectively and as efficiently as we could. So we thought, okay, let's start working on some changes that we can make, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. What I will tell you is this: our primary goal really was that let's stop the failure. Let's stop, one, the reputation. Let's make sure that systems, when we develop them, work. Let's make sure that when we get into a contracting relationship, that things work. And fundamentally, whatever changes we make, let's make sure that we're reducing the risk of failure, that we're building up the capacity of the workforce. Because one of the complaints that I'd gotten, also, I didn't put it up there, but was you weren't really impressed with the state's ability to meet up to its end of the obligations when we did get into a contractual relationship. So it was obvious to me we needed to build up the state's workforce. And fundamentally, our goal is to make sure departments have what they need, especially in the way of technology systems, to be able to serve the people of the state of California. So we started by changing the way we do our oversight as a department. And I want to talk to you a little bit about our project approval reform effort. We call it our STAR project. And fundamentally what we're doing is we're trying to break up the way we do approvals of projects so that, one, we simplify the process for departments. We make it less onerous on them by going through and doing staged approvals. And I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into them in a moment here. But the idea is to make it less bureaucratic, make it more meaningful, and focus it on the things that we see from an oversight perspective that fundamentally tend to trip up projects. So this is what it is. It's a 4-stage approval process. We've already rolled out the first stage. We're getting ready to roll out the second stage, and the next ones will be rolled out over the course of the next year or so. So I'm just going to go a little bit more in depth into it. The first stage is to really fundamentally focus on departments understanding what their business processes are. What's the problem? What's the business case? From a business perspective, what are you trying to resolve? What are the issues that are tripping you up? Secondly, we want to assess an organization's capacity to take on an initiative, right? Until they can demonstrate that, we're not going to let them move forward into the next stage. Second part of it is getting real with departments about their commitment and their willingness to do business process reengineering, because that is a fundamental issue and a big challenge that really does trip up projects. So that's part of our second stage of it. The third stage is really about understanding that procurement is part of the project lifecycle and really can be used either effectively or ineffectively to either mitigate risk or increase risk. Right? So we look at that as well. And then finally, the fourth stage is going to be about getting more realistic baselines for projects. You know, what happens today and what happened, not today, but, you know, back in 2011 is we would approve an FSR. And, you know, I used to be a department CIO, so I know the game, right? First of all, you go in and you lowball it. You say, oh, no, it's going to be inexpensive. We'll get it. And we'll have it done quick. And the reason you do that is because you won't get funding for it otherwise, or you won't get approved for it otherwise. But then we wait 3 to 4 years before we ever go out to the marketplace. Our idea here is to set the baselines a little closer to when you actually kick off a project, right, after you've done the procurement. That way the legislature has a better sense of what we're really going to take on, and departments have a better sense, and you as the bidding community have a better sense. The other thing that I would say is a key feature here is this down here. You know, we built into it along the way a staged approval process. One, if you're a department and you're not going to get to go all the way through the process, we're going to be able to stop bad projects from getting off the ground earlier. You won't have to put in as much effort, you know, just to find out that we're not going to approve it. Secondly, each of the stages builds upon itself, so that by the time that, you know, we give you the thumbs up to go out to bid, we know that you've done all the upfront planning that you really need to do. So if you as a bidding community, what you'll be able to see is that folks have done their best assessment of what's going on from a business perspective. They have a good sense of what business problems they're trying to resolve. They've gotten some level of market research on the alternatives that are out there, and they've demonstrated a commitment to business process reengineering and organizational change management and building up the capacity of the organization. they're not going to get to go to bid or go out to the market until they get to that point. So fundamentally what we're doing is we're pushing departments to do a lot more upfront planning. What we think this will lead to is shorter procurements, more success on projects, and a reduction of risk. And fundamentally, everybody will have a better sense of what they're getting themselves into before we launch a project. So as I mentioned, first 2 stages are pretty much developed and ready to go. We do have a work group made up of multiple organizations and folks within my own agency putting together the next couple of phases, which will be rolled out over the next couple of years, or the next year or so. Okay, so a little bit more on procurement. So I mentioned, you know, there was a lot of complaints about the way we do procurements. We've taken over as of July of last year, I think, or I think it was last year. We took over procurements for IT projects. And so there's a couple of things of note. One is, as we've gone through our reform efforts on procurement, we're trying to make increased use of Section 6611 procurements for a couple of reasons. One is they're more flexible. Secondly, they do provide for an opportunity to do more negotiations even after the bids are submitted. And it also provides for more communication throughout the process. And that's one thing that I think both the state folks recognize as well as the folks in the bidding community. It's important to make sure we get it right from the beginning. So communication is obviously very important. So we're using that as on a more regular basis. The other thing that we're doing is we're trying to do things in parallel to shorten the process and to make it easier for you all to bid without, you know, losing your shirts over it. We're doing things like publishing draft RFPs. That way, if there's problems, if there's issues with the requirements, we can hear from you before we actually, you know, put the final RFP package out there and ask you to commit the resources to build a bid for that. I think those have been pretty successful so far. And then, you know, as everybody has heard, one of the things that departments have complained about is, hey, you know, we're not necessarily getting great performance once we go through the whole hassle of getting a project approved, getting a procurement completed, and then getting a contract executed. So we're in the process, and we've engaged quite a bit with departments as well as with you members of the bidding community in developing a model that assesses performance on projects, especially projects once you're actually engaged. What we're looking at is past performance. There's a number of challenges with that, and I'll tell you, and I'll acknowledge right up front, the biggest challenge is, okay, how do you assess performance when the state has a big stake in a big part in how a project goes? So my commitment to you is this: we're not going to roll this out, and we're going to pilot it first of all, but we're not going to roll it out until we address some of those very specific challenges. Is how do we hold the state as accountable as we hold vendors? Secondly, you know, how do we come up with a system that's fair, that's equitable, and that you know going into an engagement what you're going to be measured on? It'll be, you know, most likely it'll be something that gets negotiated during the contract discussions and the contract negotiations. And like I said, we're going to pilot it. So we're going to try it out, and, you know, if it doesn't work well, we're going to tweak it. But I think, you know, that this will show a lot of promise. So the net impact of this is that we have been able to have success in the procurements that we've done so far. We've been rolling some of these things out and trying them as we've gone. I think since we've taken over project procurement, we've had something like 31 different procurements, and I think our average timeline, I don't see Marnell Voss in here, so she can't contradict me. But oh, she's sick, so she really can't contradict me. But right now our timeline is just under 9 months per procurement. So, you know, we made some improvements in that. Okay, so let's talk about our cloud initiatives. There's been a lot of questions and a lot of, I think, confusion around it. So let's start off by talking about what are California's cloud initiatives, what is this thing we call Cal Cloud, and what's our approach to it. So let's start by sharing with you what our premise is from the Department of Technology. Fundamentally, our premise is cloud is just a new model for delivering technology services, computing services. It's no different than when we went from mainframes to, you know, client server, or client server to web-based, or web-based to, you know, mobile computing. It's just a different model for delivering services. It's not in and of itself the panacea that some people would have you believe it is, or something completely foreign and new. And so we do these things. And so, the way we do things in California is that enterprise technology services get delivered through OTEC, through our data center. Stuff that is not enterprise or that, folk have, that's more unique, get delivered through our, individually through departments, and they're on their own for that. So a couple of things that I would point out, and again, this is one, we've been in the cloud business for a while, in case anybody didn't know, right? We started a couple of years ago with email. So cloud email is out there. It was competitively bid. There's a bid actually on the street today, correct? For cloud email. So that's out on the street. Most recently, we've gotten into the infrastructure business, right? So we went out and did a competitive procurement, and now we're offering infrastructure in the cloud, again, through the data center. But it's not the only things that we're doing. We're also doing applications in the cloud. So we have service desk in the cloud. We have customer relationship management in the cloud. A couple of other ones as well. So in the future, as we look at other technologies and services, especially those that can be used and leveraged across the way, across the state's portfolio, enterprise services are going to be delivered at OTEC in an enterprise fashion. These things combined are what we're calling California's cloud initiatives, or CalCloud. We're not so naive as to believe that departments aren't doing this stuff on their own, and some of them are ahead of where we are as a statewide agency, right? So we know departments have gone out and bought cloud applications or cloud infrastructure or other things as well, cloud services. So, we came out with a cloud first policy. One, because cloud computing really does offer a faster time to market, a reduction in risk, hopefully a reduction in cost. And so fundamentally our policy is this. If it's an enterprise service, we're going to ask that we're going to try to stand it up at the data center. And so we're asking from each of the vendors that are out here, if your company is in the cloud business, if you have 3 to 4 to 5 to 8 departments that all want your services, consider putting them at OTEC and make it an enterprise service. I'll talk a little bit more about the cloud policy in a second, but I just wanted to clear up a couple of the items of chaos and speculation and confusion out there. So first and foremost, what you'll see here is, like I said, we've been in cloud business for a while. Our cloud email was competitively bid. See the companies that got it there, CSC and Microsoft are incumbents. Cloud infrastructure also competitively bid. The companies there, IBM, KPMG. Some of the applications that we already have in the cloud that are, again, enterprise level are portfolio management. We have CA Technologies, PPMM, used to be Clarity, Service Desk, so BMC Remedy, and Customer Relationship Management, Salesforce, right? The thing I wanted to point out is each of these has been competitively bid, and there are multiple vendors. There's multiple companies that are involved in California's cloud initiatives. So, as we go forward and we look at other technologies in the future, we'll be doing that as well, right? The other thing that I would point out is, especially for those of you that are interested in offering cloud services, that this really is an opportunity. Make your service an enterprise service and get it into the cloud, into CalCloud. Makes it easier for departments to buy your services, and hopefully creates a better market for you. A couple of other items that I think have been confusing to folks. One is there will not be a separate cloud MSA, right? We have an MSA. We don't want to go out and reinvent the wheel every time. So, if you're offering transition services to help people move into a data center or doing assessments, you can do cloud assessments as well. Secondly, cloud technologies and services are already available through a number of different procurement vehicles, leverage procurement vehicles, CMAS, for example. There's been questions and folks saying, okay, when is WSCA coming out? So we are working with DGS on that. Our target is to release the WSCA cloud services for cloud technologies at the end of January, I believe. So what will happen there is for departments that want to use WSCA, in the user instructions, it'll tell you, okay, just comply with this California's cloud policies. For locals, they can just use it however they want to use it. Although, interestingly enough, we do have interest from a lot of local governments in using our CalCloud services and leveraging the data center. So back to the mechanics of it. So we've got a strategy. You know, the strategy is whatever is enterprise, let's run it through the data center. We'll broker it. Not that we're going to try and run it all ourselves, but we'll broker it and make it easier for departments to leverage and to access the services. If it's not, then we'll ask departments to do that on their own. We do have reporting and oversight on this stuff, so we do want to know from departments when they are getting cloud services. Again, not because we want to stop them, but because we want to know, one, that they're complying with requirements around using standard terms and conditions. And then secondly, if there is a market there for a non-enterprise service, let's make it easier and make it available to all departments. There's a couple of items here highlighted in yellow because I think these are potential opportunities for those of you in the private sector. One is we built into our infrastructure contract some level of service in the way of assessments and transition planning for the early adopters, but it's only a small part of it, right? So as departments go about complying with the cloud first policy, they're going to need help. So I think this is an area, this is a market that is ripe. Also, getting your cloud offerings into the OTEC service catalog, I think, is also an opportunity for all of you. And again, you know, as we go about acquiring these services, whether through OTEC or through individual departments, we are asking agencies to make sure you comply with DGS's provisions and terms, and that we use the vehicles that we already have in place. So, you know, fundamentally, back to our picture here, our policy is this. Our policy is pretty simple. Cloud first. If you're going to invest in technology, look to the cloud. If you're going to invest in technology, look to the cloud first. Look to the enterprise cloud services first. So when we talk about, you know, leveraging enterprise services, that's a big cloud there, right? So if you're going to go get email, don't go out and try and contract for email on your own. Use our cloud email solution. And if those don't work for you, then, you know, you're free to go out and look to the commercial sector, you know. In terms of reporting and oversight, we do ask, let us know what you're getting. We comply with the requirements of the leverage procurement vehicles, and, you know, make sure you address things such as security, you know, so that you know what sort of data you're putting in the public cloud. Anyway, so that's our cloud strategy, our cloud initiatives. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about information sharing, because this is something that I think has already shown and demonstrated great promise for us here in California. Christy talked to you about our Project Academy series. So our Project Academy series is simply this. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about what makes projects work and what makes projects fail. And so the curriculum for this Academy series is specifically built around teaching people how to make projects successful. How to make state IT initiatives successful. I don't know if Christy mentioned it, but we've actually trained over 1,500 people already just in this last year. So, you know, you should start as vendor partners, you should start seeing a market improvement in the way that the state discharges its responsibilities on projects. Here's the other thing too. The grapevine, just as it is thick out in the vendor community, it's just as thick inside of government too. So departments are sharing information. They're sharing information about lessons learned, about what's worked, and actually when they're running into challenges and issues, especially in terms of engagements with the private sector. So just be aware, folks are sharing a lot of information, and it's starting to pay off too, because what we're seeing is folks are saying, oh, well, what can we do to prevent that happening to us? And in some cases, folks are just kind of on their own, gravitating towards enterprise thinking. And it's not just the departments, but we at the state level, at the national level, the departments or CIOs are sharing information too. The last 2 or 3 NASCIO events that I've been at, and actually even outside of NASCIO, we've had states just kind of come together and in some cases do really good, you know, competitive, here's what we're doing, here's what you're doing. I was commenting to Carol Henton, the California's mobile app gallery got picked up by a couple of other states, and they're now doing the same thing. And actually NASCIO, the National Association of CIOs, took our idea and made it national. right? So they're sharing on the good stuff, but we're also in some cases coming together around a table for group therapy, right? It's like, oh my gosh, we have this project and we're having these problems on this contract or whatever, and it turns out 6 or 7 other states are in the same boat. So we're doing a lot of lesson sharing there as well. We're also talking to our stakeholders, and in our case here in California, our stakeholders are people outside of the IT community, right? It's the policymakers, whether it's on the executive branch side. The legislature is very interested and involved in what we're doing as a state, so we spend a lot of time talking with them as well about what's going on in our projects, what are we doing in our initiatives, and how things are going. And the good news is they're very invested, and they want to see the improvement that we're starting to see as well. And then finally, this is to the issue of getting access to, what's the state's priorities? What are individual departments' priorities going to be? One of the things that we've adopted as a kind of a premise here among the state's IT leadership is we're asked to participate in a lot of planning for conferences, for events, right? Whether it's the CIO Academy to, a forum on cybersecurity. So one of the things that we're going to ask is, as we go forward in these events, is that at each event we have at least one session where we just take 2 or 3 or 4 departmental CIOs, put them on a panel and say, ask them whatever you want to know. And so what we'll do is we'll rotate the CIOs. That way you can have access to, to what's happening in corrections, to what's happening in education, to what's happening in the labor agency, to the different departments out there. And I think what that'll do is that'll help you to understand and have some access to the individual CIOs and help them to share their vision and their priorities. So, really that's the end of my comments, other than to say, I hope that what you can see out of this is that we are trying to address the issues that are concerns, primarily because we see them as being important and being successful in delivering technology to the state. We want partnership with the private sector. We can't do this without, obviously, without all of your help. We're trying to make reforms that make our processes and our efforts more efficient and smarter, and ultimately that deliver successful projects. And fundamentally, I think we're all after the same thing. We want successful systems that work to enable government to do its job, that enable government to serve its constituents. So I look forward to working with all of you in partnership. I know that we have some more question and answers during the panel, so I look forward to engaging you within that. So thank you very much.